Chapter 13. Rose had hurried away from the broom closet as quickly as her skirts and propriety would allow. She had wanted to pick up her skirts and run, but fear of observers held her to a more sedate pace. As soon as she was away from the closet, she whisked herself into the ladies' retiring room, where a mirror had been conveniently placed for the guests' use. Surprised to see how flushed she was, Rose hastily glanced around the room, hoping she was not being observed. A maid sitting in the corner was paying her very little attention, and the rest of the room appeared to be unoccupied. Turning her attention back to the mirror, Rose was glad to see that despite her close encounter with Alex, Mary's hard work on her coiffure had not been laid to waste. There wasn't much she could do about her flushed cheeks, so with a slight shrug she turned away from her own reflection and headed back to the ballroom. Well aware that it was her excitement making her colour so hectic, Rose determined to set her mind to other things. Remembering her and Elizabeth's plan to aim Anne in a different direction, she determined to try her hand once more at matchmaking. Scanning the room for her quarries, her eyes lit upon one. Grinning, she headed across the room with purpose. "Lady Anne, you look lovely this evening." "Oh, Miss Rosamond, how kind of you to say so," came her soft reply. Rose suppressed her amused smile and tried hard to keep the conspirator's glee from her face. She had never considered herself to be a busybody, but she was so excited about the meddling she was about to do. "Are you enjoying your evening thus far?" Rose asked gently, pleased that her tone came out just how she would like, not too bored, but not invasive either. "It is not as crowded as some of the balls I have been to, so that is pleasant, to be sure." Rose was puzzled over Lady Anne's lukewarm response. "Is everything all right with you, my lady?" she asked in a low voice, making sure not to draw undue attention to them, but concerned about the young woman. It was apparent that Anne was trying to put on a brave face. "You recall the conversation we were having, do you not?" "About suitable husbands and how to acquire them?" Rose asked, as neutrally as possible. "That's right," Anne replied with a slight smile over Rose's wording. "My father has decided that I have dithered long enough, and wishes me to proceed as soon as possible." Rose was glad for the experience she had in maintaining a straight face despite this provocative statement. Keeping her composure with effort, she prompted discreetly, "And you are unsure if you want to proceed, is that the problem?" Anne's nod was miserable. "What you said about a husband not wanting to be trapped really made me think. What if Papa is wrong about affection being engaged after the marriage is arranged? What if my husband were to take me in disgust if he were to find out that it was all a trap? I do not want to be miserable for the rest of my life." Feeling her heart go out to the other woman, Rose was glad that she had already determined on her set course. Lady Anne could not have Alex, but she deserved to be happy. Clasping Lady Anne's hand warmly in her own, Rose reassured her quietly. "Have no fear, my friend. We shall ensure you find happiness. Let us find you an uncomplicated husband who will be delighted to make you happy." Lady Anne brought her eyes to focus on Rose's face. "Are you sure that is even possible?" "Absolutely," Rose replied, with as much conviction as she could muster, grinning as she saw hope dawn in the other woman's eyes. "Good. It will not do for you to look as though you were heartbroken. Men do not find that terribly attractive for the most part, in my experience." This brought a rather watery chuckle to Anne's lips, but she did manage to look a little happier. Rose again gazed about at the milling crowds and was delighted to see the object of her search. Ignoring the vulgarity of her forward behaviour, she raised a hand and beckoned for Lord Edgecombe to join them. "What are you doing?" Anne asked in a low but urgent voice. "I am looking for your happiness. Lord Anthony is a kind, delightful young viscount who strikes me as a likely candidate to make any lady a wonderful husband. And in any case, it looks to me that he is a good dancer. If you do not think he is a good choice for husband, you can at least enjoy being on the dance floor." Anne looked a little confused over Rose's managing ways, but could not argue with her logic. Rose felt her amusement rise as she watched Anne muster up a welcoming smile when the kind viscount arrived, looking at the two ladies questioningly. "Is everything all right with you two?" he asked solicitously. All is well. Thank you so much for asking, my lord, Rose replied briskly. We just needed you to settle a dilemma Lady Anne and I were having. Rose watched with delight as Anne looked at her askance, but Lord Anthony bowed slightly. I would be happy to help in any way that I can, he answered gallantly. I am rather embarrassed to admit to you that we were discussing your dance skills, my lord. Rose struggled to contain her blush at this bold statement, but was amused to see the stain creeping into the Viscount's cheeks as well. My dance skills? He repeated with surprise. Whatever for, miss? Because you are a delightful dance partner. I was telling Lady Anne that I think you are better at the waltz, but she was insisting that she thinks you are more skilled at the country dances. Rose paused, while her two companions looked between her and each other. At the perfect moment, she could hear the orchestra striking up the next number. How lucky is that? It seems to me that they are about to play a waltz. Why don't you be a dear and prove me right, my lord? Show Lady Anne what a marvellous waltzer you are. Rose nearly giggled over the look of incredulity that crossed Lord Edgecombe's face. He is looking at me as though I have lost my mind, she thought, controlling her expression with effort. He might not be that far off from the truth, she answered herself, as she watched him pull himself together and reply diplomatically. I do not think I need to prove anything to either of you ladies, but I would be happy to dance the waltz with you, Lady Anne, if you would do me the honour of being my partner. Blushing, Anne accepted before shooting Rose a dubious look of censure, which Rose chose to ignore, merely grinning at the departing pair. At that moment, Lord Dunbar appeared at her elbow. You look decidedly pleased with yourself, Miss Rose. What have you been up to? Batting her lashes vigorously, Rose tried to put a confused look onto her face. I have no idea what you are talking about, my lord. That I sincerely doubt, my dear. But would you do me the honour of dancing this waltz with me? That would be a delight, my lord. Thank you. Rose grinned at Wesley with pleasure. As the strains of the waltz swept them into the rhythms of the dance, Rose happily followed the Viscount's lead, while trying to ignore his searching glance. Is that your strategy, then, miss? With a soft sigh, Rose saw that the man would not be put off, although she tried once more. Whatever do you mean, my lord? She asked, with as much innocence as she could muster. Now Wesley could not prevent his chuckle, but he managed to contain it so as not to cause a scene. You really are a minx, aren't you? I can see now why Wrentham cannot get himself to cut his ties with you despite the convoluted family history. Seeing the stricken look upon Rose's face, the Viscount hastened to make his apology. Forgive me, my dear, that was inexcusably cross. Rose managed to maintain her composure, and with impatience she waved away his apology and returned to the subject she had previously been trying to avoid. Now it seemed like a welcome diversion. You were asking me about my strategy, my lord, she reminded him. Grateful for the change of subject, Wesley was quick to jump in. Yes, it would appear that your plan is to save the Duke by means of diverting the lady's attentions elsewhere. You are only very partially correct, my lord, Rose replied primly before breaking into a smile. She could not hold on to her offence with the pleasant Viscount. For one thing, I am quite convinced that Alex is fully capable of saving himself, if the need should arise. But in this instance, I do not actually believe that merely redirecting the lady's attention would save him. It strikes me that there is more afoot than entrapping a wealthy mate for Lady Anne, and I do believe she is as much a potential victim as the Duke. I think she is a sweet young woman who will be in need of a suitable mate if this situation goes sideways, as it is sure to. I think Lord Edgecombe is a lovely young man who would treat her well. I merely thought to ensure that the two of them have an opportunity to look at one another in a different light. There is nothing quite like taking a turn on the dance floor to the tune of a waltz to put one in a suitable frame of mind. Now Rose could see the light of teasing enter into Wesley's eyes. Oh, good. So does this mean that if I were to approach your father, you would be amenable to my suit? Rose rolled her eyes drolly. If you had been trying to engage my interest, surely you would have seen fit to direct the conversation to more appropriate avenues than censuring me for my managing ways. Wesley was quick to protest. I did not call you managing. It was surely implied by your questions, my lord. Rose giggled at the look of confusion covering the Viscount's face, and quickly gave way. Never mind, my lord. We are co-conspirators at the moment, and that pushes all other thoughts from our minds. You are perfectly safe dancing the waltz with me. I shall not be misconstruing your intentions, have no fear. Blissfully unaware of Wesley's conflicted feelings, Rose was happy to finish the dance and return to the sidelines. There she was handed off to another gentleman waiting for her hand for the next song. Feeling bemused, Wesley went off in search of Alex. "That chit is a menace, Rentham," he declared without preamble after ascertaining that they were not within easy earshot of anyone else. "Who might you be speaking of?" Alex asked absently. "Surely you know full well of whom I speak. Miss Rosamond Smythe," Wesley declared with fervour, causing Alex to look at him rather askance. "What has happened?" Alex's concern was clearly evident. "From where I am standing, it looks as though she is having a good time, dancing and visiting with her friends." "She has absolutely no idea of the power she wields," Wesley declared with conviction. "She thinks that because we are conspiring, there is no way I could possibly view her in an amorous light." Alex could feel his features tightening, and tried to keep his tone unthreatening as he demanded, "Do you see her in an amorous light?" "No, yes, that is hardly the point," Wesley replied hotly. "Then what is the point, because I do not see one clearly evident, my lord." Wesley must have realized the error of his ways as he quickly backpedaled. "Do not get up in your high ropes, Rentham. I am not about to poach on your territory. I am merely concerned for the both of you in this situation. She is a highly attractive girl, and she has no idea of that. I think that puts you both in grave danger. Her heart is too tender for one thing. She is feeling sorry for the Austen chit, and wants to ensure she is well matched before the situation blows up in our faces. Can you imagine? She has no care for her own well-being, but she feels badly that she is interfering with the lady's plans for you. She wants to ensure the girl has a second option in place. She was playing matchmaker just before I asked her to dance." Alex looked at his friend with confusion on his face. "And how does that make her a menace?" "She told me that she thinks the waltz is the most romantic dance. That is why she wanted Edgecombe to dance with Lady Anne for the waltz. But she thought neither she nor I were at risk of warmer feelings because we are too involved in the conspiracy to be so distracted. If that is how innocent she is at grave risk of getting hurt in all of this. Despite your family's feud, the two of you are going to fall in love, and it is going to be a big mess." Wesley ended this statement with rather melodramatic flair, which brought a reluctant smile to Alex's face. "It is a big mess already, so there is naught we can do about that. But you are right, Rose is an innocent, and that does need to be kept in mind. I hold no ill will toward her as a person, but her parents are another matter altogether. The words that were exchanged when my brother died cannot be overlooked. For Rose's sake, I have resisted pursuing justice for my family, but there is no way I can allow our names to be bandied about. I am most certain she feels similarly on the subject, so I believe your fears are not well-founded. Was there anything else you wish to tell me?" Wesley looked at Alex, studying him to verify the sincerity of his words. "I am just surprised to find that I quite like the chit. From what I know of her parents, I didn't think to like her." "Why not?" Alex was incredulous. "Just because her parents are intolerable does not mean she has to be. It most often follows that way, does it not?" "I would like to think that I am nothing like my parents," Alex huffed. "With that very look on your face, I am sorry to inform you that you quite put me in mind of your father." Wesley barely managed to suppress the laughter that wanted to pour from him at the look of disbelief that crossed the Duke's face. "I am nothing like my father," Alex insisted, feeling the colour rise in his cheeks in his fierceness. "I often wonder if the Duke even was my father, if you must know." Wesley rolled his eyes. "There are many things that can be said about both of your parents, but surely when you look in the mirror, you must realize that, despite either of their reputations, you are most certainly a legitimate Rentham." "Sometimes I wish it was otherwise," Alex sighed, but then allowed the subject to drop. Looking back to the dance floor, he smiled. So, Rosie is playing matchmaker now, is she? I wonder if that is why her earlier dance partner went to dance with that Chadwick chit after speaking with her. It is dashed difficult to know what goes through a girl's head. Alex shook his head, and Wesley couldn't help agreeing with him. I just hope she is not distracted from our ultimate mission here. While I would not want to see Lady Anne hurt either, it is far from uppermost in my mind at this point. It seems to me that ladies are able to keep more than one thing in their mind at a time. It is an admirable quality, I must say, one that I envy them often, Wesley commented, while Alex looked at him strangely. What, Your Grace? Do you not think it would be helpful when playing whist with the likes of Lord Ashcombe? I do just fine, thank you very much. I certainly do not need the mind of a woman to keep track of my cards. Nor do I think it an asset to keep so many things uppermost in mind. It makes one easily distracted, was Alex's final comment on the matter, before he shook his head at his companion and bade him adieu. I must be off. I promised I would look in at Worthington's route this evening. And speaking of Lord Ashcombe, I do believe I shall stop in at the club and see if my feeble brain can manage a hand or two. Lord Dunbar pulled a face at his high-born friend. Mayhap I shall meet up with you there myself. It would not do to allow you to be plucked too cleanly, if your mind should be distracted by thoughts of our fair maiden. Alex's ready sense of humour prompted him to laugh at his friend's gentle ribbing. Mayhap I shall see you there, was all he had to say as he turned and strode from the room. Your daughter does not appear to be keeping up to her end of the bargain, Austin, Sir Brodrick was snarling in a low voice. These things take time, my lord, whined Lord Austin. My Annie is a good girl. She should be making an effort to catch the Duke's eye and dancing with him, rather than spending the evening with every other young buck there is. Young girls get these ideas in their heads, my lord. It takes a steady hand. Besides, catching a Duke's eye takes time. Lord Austin was plaintive. It doesn't take more than a minute to catch the eye of a red-blooded man if you know what you're doing, argued Sir Brodrick. What kind of ideas are you talking about? He demanded in a rough voice. Naught but young girls' fairy tales, my lord. Nothing for you to trouble yourself with. I will talk to her some more and forbid her from talking with those other girls. Which other girls? Brodrick persisted. And what ideas? You do not tell me what to trouble myself with. I will be kept informed of every development. She was visiting with some young ladies recently, and they were talking about making a love match. The chit thinks she might be made unhappy if her husband discovers he was tricked into marriage, Austin excused. Brodrick managed to keep in mind that they were in the ballroom of a fashionable, high-society home, with all the ton about them hungry for any tidbit of salacious gossip. He did not let loose with the tirade he wished to unleash upon the feckless lord before him. Taking a deep breath to stem the flow of words and think of the most effective way of handling the situation before him, Sir Jason finally responded. How did you allow such an idea to take root in her head, Austin? You are not keeping up your end of the bargain, from what I can see. Your only responsibility was to ensure your daughter managed to catch Rentham. It should have been an easy task. Lord Austin had visibly paled as he listened to the knight hissing his words. He had never been on the receiving end of one of Brodrick's retaliatory rebukes, but he had heard about them and was willing to do all that was necessary to avoid it for himself. Nearly cowering before the smaller man, Austin begged, My daughter is a good girl, sir. She will do what she has been told. I will see to it. I can assure you. Never mind your assurances. I can see with my own eyes just how well she is following your instructions. But I also now have an idea of the culprit. Keep your daughter away from the Smythe girl. She is nothing but trouble. I will handle the rest. Lord Austin turned bewildered eyes to the dance floor, surprised to see how happy his daughter looked in the arms of Lord Edgecombe. He did not comprehend how this tied in with Miss Smythe, but if that was all that was required of him, he could surely manage to keep his dear Anne away from her. She was a good girl, and would do just as she was bidden, he assured himself once more as he wiped the sweat from his brow as surreptitiously as possible. It was none of his business if the knight was looking with evil intent at that other girl. Lord Austen was just relieved it was not his Annie that had triggered that particular look. Feeling a shiver of dread slither down his spine, the Viscount felt a moment of shame for his involvement with the wicked man. But there was very little one could do when their pockets were to let, and such a one came around with a promise of funds for what had seemed like such an easy task. He reminded himself again that this task would in fact provide a ready solution to all his woes. Trying to brace his weak-willed spine into order, Lord Austen refused to look at the other man as he stalked away on a mission of vengeance. Alex had always been a keen observer. Stupid skill to have when one is a boy in a family such as the one you grew up in, he thought dourly. But it turns out to be terribly handy once one is an adult. You still end up seeing things you wish were not true, but at least a duke has a certain power to effect change. Now, what am I going to do about the fact that the awful Sir Jason Brodrick is looking with such evil intent at my Rosie? Striving for discretion, Alex kept his attention focused on the wicked knight, while making every effort not to be obvious to anyone, especially not Brodrick himself. It would not do to have the hunter realize he had become prey, Alex thought with a sinister twist to his lip. No doubt the man has noticed that Rose has been introducing Lady Anne to eligible gentlemen. I wonder how observant Rosamond is. As a child, she could be so single-minded that the house could burn down around her, and she would barely notice if she were absorbed in something she thought was interesting. I shall have to put a bug in her ear tomorrow to curb her matchmaking efforts with regards to Lady Anne, if she does not want to draw the ire of Brodrick down around her head. Nodding to various friends and connections as he made his way through the crowds, he was able to keep his eyes upon the goings-on of the various parties. Alex was impressed to see how Rose handled herself with whomever she encountered. Her poise would make her an excellent duchess. Alex was shocked by that stray thought, but it was true nonetheless. Just not a Duchess of Wrentham, he reminded himself, as he continued to keep his eye on her movements and tried not to notice how pretty she looked this evening in her pale, primrose gown, with the light from the myriad candles shimmering in her chestnut hair. "Aren't you just so poetical this evening?" Alex thought to himself in derision. With relief, he saw Rose approach her mother. He was most certain Lady Smythe would be able to keep Brodrick at bay.